get down to what we are actually planning to talk about, which presumably is, Glenn, thank you very much for circulating, updating and circulating your list of challenges. Would you like to take us through that and say what?
Yeah. Shall I share my screen or?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Can you do that? Do we need to enable that?
Yeah, so yeah, I can't do that.
Hang on. What am I trying to do?
Well, we also have this document, each one of us, because Glenn sent an email
Yeah.
to all of us, so we can look at it on our own screens as well, those who have it at least, or find it.
I think maybe I can't, Elif, I think maybe you need to make.
Yeah, I'm on the more button. It just says live on custom live streaming service. It doesn't have the options that it usually does. Kira,
do you want to make me co-host and I'll have a quick look?
Usually one can do it through the participants, but I can't do it. So I thought maybe you had to be a host to do it.
So sorry, you guys want to share screen? Is that right?
Yes. Well, Glenn.
Yeah, you should be able to do it now, Glenn.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Yes,
can you all see that? Okay, great.
It works.
So basically, I tried to. Well, I'll just skip to the end to start with. So I tried to add in the things that we discussed last time, which is, so there's a note of these at the end. So I think there were kind of 3 extra challenges that we thought of last time. So modeling and predicting intervention, something about modeling structures and types of models, data pre-modeling, and then this within and between host. And then there's also a few other things which I've noted here, which are just kind of less thematic, but so other issues that we might want to include at some point. I'm not sure I've included all these, but I've definitely included all A, B, and C. However, I've not done it as 3 additional challenges, but I've actually kept to the 5 and I've kind of rejigged them slightly. So the first one is, I'm not sure if this title is right, but this is basically about using models to think about the system and see if we can understand how to model a new disease or an emerging disease. And so this covers the things that I think people, I don't know, this point in particular was something that Valerie mentioned last week. So I was trying to sort of cover the idea of, using models to explore system behavior and not necessarily using data. And so developing a kind of more theoretical understanding of how different processes and structures would affect the outbreak. I added this one in, which is maybe links more to the estimation papers anyway, but I think there's an issue about once you start building things into models, then once you start doing estimation with them, how does that actually influence your estimation? That might be another can of worms that we don't want to go into here. I don't know.
May I just interrupt with a comment about this?
Yeah, please do.
Models and data. Data is always very interactive with modeling if you want to use it for something practical. So we should now and then say what kind of data and what kind of correct data we would need for our models. And I interpret the estimation paper as telling what methods they could use to estimate such data that we need. But we must, in some sense, talk about what data we would like to have.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah.
I guess, I don't know if you agree, the distinction between the estimation paper and the model paper.
Yeah, I think obviously there's some overlap there, because one of the things I think the estimation paper may be wanting to do, obviously it does cover methods, but I think it's also trying to understand the kind of types of estimation problem that you get, and that links to what data is available and what models you have, what your model structure is, so it's obviously not a clear cut, but I agree that you can't really do modeling without reference to data. So
I think probably the best thing for the moment is for people within if we're within the framework of modeling, then we should talk about whatever we think is relevant. So if we want to talk about data and estimation, we should talk about them. But at a later stage, if we maybe look across the papers and see that really people are talking about the same thing from 3 slightly different points of view, then we might discuss as to whether to do some rationalization. But I think, see what I mean? It matters much more if you ignore something than if you do it twice.
Yeah.
I want to make a note about the data free and the misspecification labels in those 2 parts, because I think we have to be careful when we're talking about data free models, because not having a data constraint model can produce anything you want. And I think maybe not calling them data free, but calling them in a scarce data environment, we are limited to sort of do theoretical analysis, and this is where we're not able to make policy really reliable predictions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, I think the data free was a phrase that was used last week, but
that's fine.
I mean, to some extent, I was trying to be slightly provocative here as well. But I think there is a role for, not being very hung up on the data. Let's put it like that.
Yes, but
that's currently available.
I'm happy to make that point, Glenn. Just noting it, and then it's equivalent the misspecification, because misspecification can mean missing things or just not being specific about your assumptions.
Okay.
Yes, but just to add something, there is a clear distinction between imagining a quantity and being able to measure it. I mean, I can make models where I say people have an infectivity profile during the disease. And then I theoretically work out what effect that has on duration and whatever. And then another guy will have the problem, how can I measure such an infectivity profile, which I haven't touched upon. I mean, that will be an estimation problem.
Yeah, I quite agree, yeah.
And it might
maybe the practical doctor will say that is not measurable. Then that will remain just an intellectual concept that there might be an infectivity profile, but we cannot measure it. Okay.
But often things that can't be measured can somehow be inferred under with some assumptions.
We'll find proxies and other things and infer them. But that's the estimation techniques that people will invent then to estimate this quantity. So there are, of course, data-free models in that sense, that I imagine a useful quantity and then somebody else comes up with how to estimate it or measure it.
Yeah, and I feel we don't want to lose that element, which is one reason why I put it first, because it's the thing that's most likely to be forgotten about, I think.
And I want to add to that that the kind of models might be incredibly useful if we can, for example, show that increasing variance always make things worse, or even if it's data free.
Exactly, that's what I was trying to get at with this idea of actionable insights, that if you can make these general statements, they can sometimes be the most useful thing that you can say, and the specific level might be hard to ascertain, but And then the last point here is just the idea that you can then use models to explore things which are really outside the current mode of thinking completely. You know, for example, you know, I don't know that I mentioned later, but you know, doing live experiments on transmission, but or on the effects of intervention on transmission.
Is this appropriate here, Glenn, or later? That's the only thing. Where maybe under the improved design as a starting point, but or here, I don't.
Yeah, I mean that may not be the best example here, but I think there's something that you can do with, say, data light models, modeling that you can explore these possible things, which then maybe later on are incorporated into, you know, as GMP says, you know.
The danger is that when you reparameterize the model, or calibrate it with more rich data set, you have moved away from the stability of that, from those dynamical systems that you explored.
Yeah, true. That's why I kind of think this part's important here. That you need to think about how these models will interact, because it's all very well saying, I don't know, this effect limits spread, but then once you fit it, then you might get an effective model that has some kind of different behavior.
Okay.
So then under each heading, I tried to identify the sort of key sort of technical modeling challenges. I don't think I've done this very well, and I'm kind of hoping that other people will add things into each of these. But I think this is the kind of meat of each section. So this is what we need to kind of work on. And using Lisa's run through of the 2015 series, I've added in her comments under each one. So this is a new one, so there isn't anything here, but there may well be things that are relevant from 2015. I'm sure there are. Here are some things that I think that we, in terms of kind of relatively limited data modeling, whatever we want to call it, we probably need to come up with a name for it. I think the within and between host modeling, I think, could fit in here, and also modeling to understand, you know, emergence of new viruses, etc., could fit in here.
Yeah. Glenn, I was going to say that one of the things that struck me when I was trying to do the sort of table for the methodologies, now the challenges at the moment were mostly worded so that they went sort of like completely across everything from environment through to elimination. And it seems to me that if that's how it is, that's how it is. But I think from the point of view of communicating with people interested in applications, it may be well to, when writing these challenges, to be aware of the sort of framework where I think it runs in a fairly logical sequence from environment through to elimination.
Yeah.
And you know, if there's no good reason for doing otherwise, for instance, if you were talking about the, I don't know, perhaps these are sub-challenges, whatever they are, if you're writing something to write it in a way that will communicate with people who think in that terms of sort of phase of the disease. So a couple of things you mentioned there are very much relevant to environment and the early stage of the emergence disease, you know, and other bits of modeling are really of most interest and difficulty when we come to think, for instance, of interventions. So no, absolutely. Because I hadn't actually seen your table until just now, but when I was writing this, I did at one point go through a bit of a crisis that maybe we should reorganize this in terms of the stage of the epidemic. So I think that's an option, but I don't think we necessarily do that. But I think we should sort of bear in mind that some people may be thinking in terms of that classification. Yeah, no, it's a very good point.
Okay, so number 2 is prediction and decision support. So this is, I mean, this is I guess the sort of the, you know, trying to integrate data up to a certain point in the epidemic, or indeed in terms of emergence, and then seeing, looking at how well our models are, how predictive are our models, and what we can do to make them, to improve that predictive ability. So I think this is where things like expanding or being able to use available data and new data in better ways comes in here. So this is the sort of phylogenomics combined with the epidemiological models. Again, I think that within and between host dynamics can play a part here too. And then there's all sorts of other things which we mentioned before. So looking at data on different scales, longitudinal sampling and so on, not, things like tracking individuals using other types of data and so on. So I think there's a lot that could be spoken about here, but again, there obviously is an interaction here with the estimation stuff.
On that, you're specifically mentioning the sort of using phylogenomics. I think actually there's that applies very much in interventions, in particular of contact tracing. I was just reading something interesting about how in Iceland they've had quite success with combining the phylogenetics with the contact tracing. So they're basically not just asking. So they're really trying to, because it provides reliable who really did infect whom data, basically. Which
and they're doing that in Austria as well. So that's a really important point as well here.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, also thinking about interventions, obviously it interacts very strongly with our ability to predict. So they're not entirely separate, but I think there's some merit in separating them.
And I think there is also an overlap with the, for the conversation I was in with the emergence, part as well. It has importance about both the phylogenetics and the linking of the within host and between host dynamics.
Yeah.
The other thing here we could maybe mention is open source data, because service data and things like that are important, and then we can then link it later on. I know there is a data collection system, but there is a gap in you having a real-time available data that are exactly needed when we are discussing prediction and decision support.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and I haven't, to be honest, looked in detail at these, but this obviously there's something worth looking at here. In terms
I can add in more bits about that. It's just kind of a key list at the moment.
Brilliant, thanks. And then again, I'm not quite sure the order is right here, but the third thing was this idea of improving our data collection using models. So thinking about how we should collect data in the future and how that would support decision making. So obviously those two interact very strongly. But again, this might be something that's more appropriate in the estimation. I'm not sure.
You're not in the data paper.
It would be. I was about to say.
Or the data paper, yeah.
I really think. I think that getting this kind of thinking into the data paper, I think, is really essential if the data paper is to be as useful as it should. Because I think there's a danger with data that people will just say, we have terribly impressive big data systems and so on. We'll just sort of, they're a solution to everything, so they're bound to be a solution to pandemics. We'll just sort of apply some kind of general data thinking to pandemics. And I think they need to be, it needs to be pointed out to them that epidemics are very tricky things, and thinking about how you get the kind of data that is actually useful is something that they're going to have to do some new thinking to get to grips with.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah.
But I mean, let's absolutely leave it here at the moment. But I think further down the line, when I prodded the data people and got them to say more about how they see the challenges, we might try and bring these things together.
Okay.
sorry, I was going to say, but it's also, I think, the thinking about the data has to kind of has a stream here, but I agree it needs to sit also at the data, and it's not about, so in my mind, modeling is not about having a lot of data, but having the good and relevant data.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and or I guess correcting for what data you have.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I
so
think
then there is, that links to the above point. When you don't have data, you can resolve to modeling, but then you need to discuss the uncertainty of that, which I hope it's coming later on.
Yeah.
And but that's the point. Whereas if you have enough data, you might have huge amounts of data, but if it's just noisy and not relevant, you still don't have enough data.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I guess.
Sorry, Glenn. I was just going to say the other thing there is the kind of adaptive experimental design challenge, both from a kind of methodological point of view, but I think we've also talked before about the idea that often these kind of surveys are quite set in stone, and how we go about manipulating and changing those to fit in with what we need, rather than necessarily what they are currently collecting or what they want to collect.
Yeah. So I think there's two things here. One is, I guess, what I would see is that this is an opportunity to make sure that, you know, these ideas are accepted more widely in the future. And so when the next pandemic comes, we're doing things better as a, you know, at a society level. And then there's also this idea of, you know, can you kind of do an adaptive design during an outbreak to sort of refine what you're able to understand.
But there is another thing. I remember that when Martina Morris was with us more frequently, she liked the concept of the weight of evidence, I think she called it, namely running models with and without certain kinds of data and see if the predictions changed a lot. What was the importance of certain data for the running of the epidemic in general? And that was a way also to decide if it was worth or not collecting certain data, if that would change the predictions a lot.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that's a role for models, of course, to do this kind of choice between data sources, which ones seem to be important and which ones seem to be less important. That could then help those who have to do the data collection. What is
the benefit of having this data, I guess?
Yes, I don't remember what the term was. Was it benefit, information benefit? But anyway, there were some people studying that concept. How much did you gain by adding certain data or not? And that's a modeling thing, that one can develop models that are good at doing this job. But then, of course, what data should be collected and where, that's more a practical problem. What we can say is that we would like certain data that would be useful for models of some kind. Yeah,
I mean, I guess also that relates to Ben's point, but I kind of feel it's important that we try and make some attempt here to say why that is not, you know, making life nice and easy for modelers is not necessarily, you know, most people would share as a sort of goal, but if we need to sort of pull that back and just show that it has a wider benefit, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, that's included in this benefit thinking, that if the predictions would be radically changed, or to a certain amount at least changed by having certain data, then maybe they're worth collecting. Other ones are just there for intellectual fun and maybe are not
Yeah.
But I think Ben's point also has a different edge to it, which is, you know, we talked about these conversations with people who are making decisions from the onset, and conversations with people who are collecting data from the onset, so that, you know, kind of the modelers often know what data, they have a feeling about what their model capacity is and strengths are, so therefore they know what the data kind of would give or not give. And so having that three-way conversation from the onset, and I think we touched upon this about, you know, the linkages when it comes to the next pandemic.
Yeah. So that is coming in point 5.
Okay.
So then So then there's a separate section on predicting the impact of interventions, because I think it's sufficiently different from just predicting the cause of the epidemic, but obviously again it's interrelated. So then this is looking at how we model things like lockdowns and other versions of social distancing, but also vaccination and test, trace and protect. And so I think, the comments that are made earlier about the phylogenetics would come in here, I think, as would some of the other things about how we understand how testing works and so on, and what that's telling us. So that there are strong links between these, but.
And here, for example, we should maybe stress that, if we are talking about the data-free models, that in terms of vaccination of an unknown emerging virus, it's important to do that because we don't know what the vaccine's efficacy, everything, the characteristics of the vaccine or what it will do is. So evaluating different strategies on a sort of plain model, data-free model, or whatever we call it, is important in terms of interventions that we don't know of or we haven't tested in the past.
Yeah.
So that's where the link with that comes here. As a contrast to, for example, a lockdown, which is, what you have as an outcome and what you're going to evaluate and what happened.
Yeah, although I think in a way, lockdown has, in my mind at least, lockdown is not that different from a new vaccine because, yes, we know it has certain effects on the Google mobility data, say, but we don't really know what sort of effects it has on transmission. I mean, and it's quite hard, even with the experience we've had in the last 6 months, I think, to actually disentangle what different. So I think lockdown itself is relatively easy to evaluate, but I think the more subtle interventions that we're currently seeing, it's quite hard to actually estimate what effects, doing certain forms of closure is having,
Okay, so then you have to add a part about behavioral components then, because a lot of this is driven by social behavior and logistics of that. Somewhere, I don't know where we put that now. Maybe in the prediction and decision sort of understanding when you have aggregate social data, maybe understanding interventions that are behavior, impact of behavioral interventions.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we putting compliance in there too? Is that come under behavior? Mm-hmm. I guess it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have several things, and I don't know how to phrase them, because for modelers, one would say that when you try to model certain effects, you have to include compliance, alternative behaviors that could arise, and efficacy of the thing itself as parameters. Then the next thing is how do you go and measure these, or how do you estimate them? And it's once again a practical problem. I mean, if we tell people we advise you not to go out, how do we estimate beforehand what kind of compliance or that would have, and what would people do instead of going out? Maybe the organized parties in their homes, how much, and I don't know. That would be something to estimate, but we as modelers should maybe include these things as parameters. That would be.
So would that fall under sensitivity analysis, JP?
Well, no, that's another thing, how to make predictions from a model that contains these parameters. So if we have a chapter for uses of models, then predictions should probably contain things like try to do a reasonable sensitivity analysis and present whatever bounds you get on effects if you don't know where you are in this sensitivity analysis.
I mean, it also probably means that we need to start working, epidemiological modelers and kind of behavioral type, social science type modelers need to start working together more. I mean, I know probably that has been going on, but certainly in the ramp grouping, there was some behavioural models, and we've had some discussions, but it's kind of we've still been in our separate camps. I imagine some people have had more interactions than I have, but maybe that is a challenge as well, is to integrate these things more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then finally, there's this idea of, I'm not sure again what the title it should be, but open, transparent, and trusted models. So that, where we sort of engage, this idea of this co-construction that I think Nigel mentioned last time, better presentation of the results, so that those who are going to use it can actually understand what they're being given and sort of make good decisions. I think there's something to be talked about there. I mean, these are kind of almost not modeling challenges, but they are challenging for modelers, if that makes sense. I think communicating uncertainty and how we do that across multiple models, and then also the idea of how you communicate effectively where the model, what the limitations and the quality of the different models are. This touches on some of the things that were raised before, I think, in the previous draft. So things like code quality, evidence of where models being tested, transparency in terms of what the actual assumptions are and what data is being used, and whether there are issues with that data, whether it's biased in some way. Some kind of peer review. And then also, again, that was mentioned last time, I think, which I think is really critical, is this idea of replicating studies. So both in terms of rerunning existing software, but also even just recoding and sort of like testing. I think all these things are important.
This is really nice. Just to say, I really like this section, Glenn.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
What co-constriction in the second line?
Construction.
Construction. Sorry, it's just I can neither type nor spell. It's a bit of a problem, but
I think you're multitasking pretty well.
Yes.
What's the co-construction mean? It means that this.
I think Nigel's point was that the modelers and the stakeholders ought to be working to develop the models from the start, rather than
together, I guess.
Yes, exactly, working together rather than the modelers doing their thing and then coming along and presented the model.
And I think this is really important because it has been going on, or people have talked about doing this for many years. And some stakeholders are better at accepting than others. But I think we have to make it an important point. And I think we should add the data people here as well. So those that are collecting data have to be the third hand of the conversation, no?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
And just the subtle thing, communication of uncertainty, and basically having, so we could give SPIM as an example of a multi-model working group, but it's not that transparent is the point. And I think if we had, so the third point, communication of uncertainty outputs from multiple models. So we don't have to specifically name it, but we say there are groups that exist, but having a transparency and fully reproducible. So for example, the curves that we saw on the briefing the other day, many other groups, including myself, have done such curves, and they are not there. And why are they not there is a question that beggars, right?
Yeah. It's just for my benefit. Yeah, no, I think all that is, and that's all about the general idea there is building sort of, trust in the process and understanding of what's going on. I mean, I don't know if you saw my father-in-law sent me the Telegraph headline this morning, which is all about the models were wrong. And,
I know, I saw that, and the thing is that how do you define wrong there? I was also sending.
Yeah. But I think it's, I mean, aside the sort of, agenda there, I think that what it shows is that there is a real poor understanding of what the process is and what is possible and what isn't possible. And
I think the process is quite hidden. So trust and openness, transparency. I think this actually title is spot on, Glenn. I mean, the title of 5.
Yeah, number 5. Yeah. Okay, and then I think in terms of sort of some technical things, there's potentially some software tools that might be useful to enable this kind of thing to go on. And then there's probably more work that needs to be done on how we handle multiple models and compare and combine them. Okay, so that's essentially it. And I've produced a table at the bottom, which is for each of these 5 things. And what I was thinking was it might be useful. I mean, I started trying to fill this in last night and then gave up. But I think what might be useful is to put specific topics down the side here in terms of modeling that we could then identify which of these 5 areas that they would contribute to, and at least to give us a sense of whether there's any sort of obvious gaps or whether there's, maybe that some of these things need to be combined because they essentially relate to the same topics but I thought that might be quite useful thing that people could contribute.
But effectively, your father-in-law is right. The Telegraph is a quite interesting first page on that. COVID graphs were wrong and death toll will not surpass first wave. The use of data is not just confusing, the errors are misleading. Government signals shift away from modeling amid outcry over wrong data. These are the 3 main headings, and then there are some graphs about wrong projections of death tolls of second wave. So it's an interesting first page, I need to think.
Yeah.
But I think the main
maybe
thing is
they are right, but the predictions for the second wave are not really as
those
for
graphs,
the first.
there is many things we'll question, even though we know what's going on in those models. And I think that's where the worry is. And my first question is when I saw that, why is there only 4 there? I know there are more people that did the same graphs.
Yeah.
So how do we go? Where do we go from here? This is a great, fantastic start, almost written.
But one thing that this Telegraph page inspires me to think is that one should also, in the models, have a project for updating all the parameters that could change with time, because that's what this Telegraph page is about, that the second wave is not like the first. And that may be because people have changed the whole contact matrix by now, just by...
We have that. Jumpy, that's the point. Real-time data assimilation and inference for better prediction, in prediction and decision.
It is somewhere in the list, yes. But maybe it's an important point to know what could change over time in the parameters. For instance, I've been working with some people about the thing like generation time estimates, and they are changing as well with time because they are influenced by interventions and by data collection or whatever. And so people who use a kind of generation time from the start probably don't quite coincide with what is happening now. And those things should then be in the project, in a sense, right? How to follow up parameter change. But yes, maybe they are in the list. I admit not having read the list completely, every line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I took out real time from the title, but I did wonder, one of the titles, but I did wonder whether it's something that should be more prominent, because yeah, I agree. But...
Yeah, so maybe in the 2, prediction and decision
support. Yes, that's the second line, sorry, in the prediction and decision support.
So real time, basically, prediction and decision support.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you have a table, right? Where you have, is it a summary more or less, Glenn?
Yeah, so the table is, so what I thought we could use the table for was a kind of data, a sort of collation of various points that people would want to include. So I don't know if there are particular topics. You know, I was thinking we could get quite technical with the column down the left-hand side, and actually add in sort of the types of things we would want to discuss. You know, so I don't know what that would be, but you know, it could be, you know, I don't know, modeling kind of time variation in contact structures or something like that. You know, I don't know, whatever, but quite specific. And so we could have quite a long list there, and we could then see which of these 5 headings it would be best be described under. It might be that it's relevant to more than one, but we might choose to describe it on another. So I thought it might be quite a good way of collating all the different inputs that we would want to include.
Okay.
As I say, I started making I started it, but it's very incomplete at the moment. So I was going to propose that was a kind of task that people could go away and just add some things to this table in the next, you know, for next week, maybe. I don't know how we're doing in terms of timescale, but.
Yeah, and I guess the next thing is to identify who wants to write. I mean, if we are happy with the structure, which I am happy, and it sounds like everybody is as we are talking, then maybe we identify who wants to write which bit and do that.
Yeah.
I mean, not write it, but identify and then start thinking about it.
Yes, while people think about what they want to write, may I just say a few words about the task that was given to me and Peter, namely think about the introduction, that we have more or less thought about a rather short introduction, and maybe we still have to look at some details in it, but we thought we could post that and send it around. I guess that I have, maybe from Dennis's email, a kind of mailing list. Do I have a mailing list of our group, more or less, Dennis?
But you could just put it in the Dropbox, MP.
Okay. Should I put it in the Dropbox? Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can
maybe also put a little note in the Slack channel to tell people it's there.
Yeah.
There is something.
That's why I thought of a mailing list.
Yes, quite exactly.
Solves all these problems.
Yeah.
But okay, I'll find some way to do this.
But I mean, yes, I think if you reply to one of those messages from Dennis to this group, you should pick up, or me, you should pick up everybody.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I also try to put it in the Dropbox.
Yeah.
So that as soon as, but it's rather short.
Do you want to share it, and maybe we go over that? We have a bit of time left.
You want to see the version as it is now?
If you think so, if you think it would be helpful.
Does Peter agree that we can show the version as it is?
Oh, of course. It's mostly your work.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of saying. Okay.
No. Well, I take responsibility as well. I agree with all you said, but you deserve the praise of setting it together.
Thank you, well. Okay, can I share the screen then? Do I need a...
I'm not clear. Try it and see if it works.
Let's see if I have this share screen. Well, maybe yes. Let's see if I can find it.
I think they've probably set it up so we can all share screen.
Do you see a Word document now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you magnify, expand it?
Yes, I will try to do something about this, depending on whether you see the magnification.
Yeah, it's getting bigger.
It's getting bigger, and let me. Well,
and you need.
I have some problems with different kind of small things, and then let's go like this.
No, that's.
Do you now see it slightly bigger?
Looks
That's
good to me.
reasonable even on my quite small screen. So good.
Okay, because I could try maybe if I have full screen. Enter full screen. Let's see what that does, if it works on you as well. Do you see it full screen now?
I see a full white screen.
Yeah. Nothing on it.
You see a completely white screen.
Yeah, but there's
With
a
a
little
blinking-
blob in the middle. There's a little document sign in the middle of it. Teeny weeny one.
Okay, so it's probably not the best thing to tell Word than to do this thing. I will now go back to normal. Okay,
I think what you did before looked pretty good
was better,
to
yes.
me. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
are we back to more or less a good
Yeah.
view of the document? Sorry. Okay, so as you see, it has a short section here, which I could call historical.
Mhm.
And that's it. And then we kind of give a motive to why we are writing this, because facing this new pandemic, we have come up with some new challenges that we would like to discuss. And then follows a kind of categorization of models depending on various dimensions. So you can talk about the usefulness of modeling, and here you have some categories. The qualitative understanding that we have said, we have phrased that in various ways, data-free modeling and whatever. I call it qualitative, just to investigate how various factors could influence the spread and how important they are in some general sense, without necessarily having numbers. But then the second point is yes?
So I was only going to say that I think using the word qualitatively is a good idea, because it gets away from the objections that Jasmina was expressing earlier about the data free and so on. And,
Yeah.
and it's a bit, I think it's clearer, really. I mean, we can explain what we mean by it, but I think it's a better term. So perhaps
Yes,
we
but
can try to.
there's a lot of these things around. Instead, like non-parametrical methods are full of parameters, and the data-free method is in reality has all data in it in an abstract way, all possible data. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just saying, let's try and work with qualitative and quantitative for a while and see if that.
Yes, that's the word I've used, but
way.
let's see if these are liked. So, and the next thing is, of course, to allow also quantitative predictions, especially for the future, which are useful for various things. And then the third point is a little bit abstract, but a model is, of course, a deduction machine in a sense. So it can be used just for experimenting with things that cannot be experimented in practice, but at least see how close what you then do in practice would be to an ideal. It is a little bit theoretical, so maybe one should not mention logical.
I quite like logical deduction machinery. I've never seen that before.
Yes, well, that's what the model does, but that's a mathematician's point of view of a model.
Exactly, but I've not seen it mentioned in any of the public, the papers we have seen. So I think that's great. What do others think? I think we should use it.
Well, you just read through this thing, and then we'll change it as other things in the manuscript. And then I see it as a statistician that a model allows you to interpret data, because in reality you can, I don't know, it's also a theoretical point of view. You cannot interpret data without some kind of model in your head. And therefore models allow you to interpret data in a way. And then you have the thing about, because I thought about these quotes that are quite interesting about the boxes, all models are wrong, or Einstein's a model. Well, we don't really know when he said it, but a model should be as simple as possible, but not more, etc. that we essentially understand reality by making simpler models. We rarely really see all the complexity when we think about reality. So models are also a kind of summary of what we think is important in a situation. But anyway, so I kind of try to explain or enlarge maybe some of these famous quotes, Einstein and Box, interpreting them. But after having said about what models are useful for, then you have various things that you can model. And here comes a list of interesting things that could be changed and added to or deleted from these aspects. And then comes a short list of techniques that have been used, and that can also be either expanded upon a little bit if you think that's necessary, and that depends of course on what kind of audience we expect. If everybody already knows what the difference is between a compartmental individual based model, or if one should give examples. But then after having said that, you have these things, then you have the motivation in a sense for what follows. That after having thought of models in different dimensions according to usefulness, subject and technique, then all the things we will discuss in what follows, the challenges, has to do with some of these points or several of them put together. And that is a short way of introducing the stuff. And then we can go on now listing challenges in whatever way we think is interesting to group the challenges. I don't know. This is a very short introduction, and one can maybe flesh it out here and there, but
I think it's excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. Really good.
Clear and logical.
Anyway, that's the state. And I also left here the Lisa's list of 2015 references, because either one can comment upon what they said in detail compared to this, or just have them as references in a sense to some of these points, because we will need some references here and there, and all these are papers, so one can just have them as references. Models may address various aspects of diseases. That's probably 1 or 2 or 3 of the challenge papers from 2015, but we kind of make our own list anyway after having referred to some previous work of this kind. So that's why I left this Lisa's comment or whatever, but I've included it in one of my comments, but it's not mine. I mean, it's Lisa's list. Okay, that was the introduction as. But I'll then set it around and try to put it in various places, so we can then think about it.
No,
Shall I stop sharing at the moment? Yes. Have you?
Do
you want to see something specific?
Yeah. I have one question, which is not, which is more a question on what you wrote. Not that I want to change it, but I'm a student of Odo Diekman in that sense, and always seeing the distinction between compartmental and individual based is a bit hard to me, because many would say that the models Odo studies are compartmental, but because he uses techniques which are compartmental perhaps, but I think that building up just as he does it in the book with Hans Heesterbeek, for example, is very much individual based. So I don't see a hard distinction between the two.
I think it's there's a whole range, isn't there, Peter? You know, I mean, individual based could mean that you've got some kind of world geographical data and are trying to reproduce some sort of simulation of the real human population with all its links. I mean, the way maybe Vespignani is trying to do.
Yeah, okay, I see that.
Or it could mean something which is much more sort of mathematical toy model. I mean, like, for example, there was the, this is the example we had from the Netherlands. I don't know if you were there on Monday for the presentation, that which is a sort of compartmental at various levels, but it's done in a rather schematic way. It's without being really tied to data. I mean, and compartmental could mean just breaking the population down into, I don't know, let's say 5 age groups or something.
Yeah.
Or it could mean something which is compartmentalizing, putting people in compartments for work and for home and so on in some overlapping way. So
Okay.
But this could be expressed by a slightly longer sentence, like the
exactly. I think it's just a longer sentence, Jean-Paolo, to make it clear. There's a whole range of possibilities here,
yes,
and obviously, what will be very helpful is to have 1 or 2 really good references that discuss the sort of range of models which people can look to if they want more detail.
So can I just add? So in my mind, I do understand the Dickman reference here, but in my mind, compartmental models are really population-based models, and they're averaging across the population and putting people in boxes where there is more than one person in the box. Agent-based or individual-based models are stratifying everything by person, and so you look at the connections, or if you think of both of them as a graph model, then there is a linkage only between 2 people and then with another person. So that's the way I think about agent-based model and population or compartmental-based model. Obviously, if you average across a population in a limit case, you can derive one from the other, or break out one to the other. And the example to do this is like how you know, the other concept is you use Van Forester equation and you have a PDE from which you derive an SEIR. And many people don't do this because SEIR is accepted, but that's where it originates from. So I think that's the distinction that's kind of accepted in epidemiological modeling. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, but maybe one shouldn't try to make these categories, because if you think about something, take in theory homogeneously mixing population, but where I say that there is a distribution of infectivities. So every person then takes a specific value for its infectivity. What is that? Is that an individual then based thing, which has a population distribution, or is it one group? Or maybe it's difficult.
So that's a compartmental model with distribution, with Bayesian distributions, or you know, you call it. Yeah, but it's still a compartmental because it looks at population. But I'm just saying that's kind of how we think of it. But it's okay.
But the example, but I just think, sorry, Jasmine, I think there's just such a big range of models. I think we somehow have to give some concept of this. I mean, for example, you could have an agent-based model, which is, as I say, is a bit like what I think Vespignani is trying to do, where you more or less try and have a model in which, you know, there's some individual in this model who actually sort of represents me, because they've actually got data on the whole population, and maybe through you, but obviously they would be making a world model is not really going to know much about me, but it will be trying to model individuals who do things like they are working from home and they do not socialize much, as opposed to other people who are my grandchildren with whom I have links, go to school and things like this. So a sort of realistic individual model. At the other extreme, I mean, a long time ago, I used to be very interested in lattice models. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, lattice models are individual based. And as a probabilist, as a mathematician, you really exploit the fact that you have models in which you have individuals. So for instance, you have 2 different structures and you relate how, and you have theorems about how if these individuals have links with a slightly different pattern, you can make some kind of deduction about how this changes the behavior of the whole phenomenon. So that is absolutely an individual-based model, but it's nevertheless a complete mathematical abstraction. It doesn't relate to the population. So, and thinking of compartmental things, you know, you can start with compartmental where you just divide the whole population into 3 age groups, something like that, and you can go on to, you know, overlapping compartments, overlapping groups, and at some point in that process, you are perhaps talking about individuals. Maybe it's some model that isn't quite that level. You're talking about groups. But
so yeah, I get your point. Fully get
Yeah.
your point. And I think of actually lattice models as network models in my mind, because that's how I think of them. So, but the point is maybe the way to differentiate is because compartmental originally was just SEIR being the compartments, i.e. the transmission of infection. And that's how you think of individual, which is person to person transmission or population to population transmission.
I have to disagree here. Have you read Cormack and McKendrick papers?
Yes, okay.
They are much more subtle than what you...
They are much more subtle. I'm trying to find something to differentiate. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, let's leave it to think through, but it's
Yes.
we need some kind of stratification.
Yes, and then there is 2 ways out of this. I mean, one is to try then to flesh this out with more examples. Well, one could cite different kinds of models and techniques combined, etc. Or else, as Wittgenstein would have said that, well, he didn't say it exactly like that, what you cannot say clearly should not be said. Then we could leave this out and not have a specification.
I think we have to have it in. I think it would be very hard not to say.
Okay,
anything.
but then maybe we must flesh it out and point out combinations and spectra.
Well, just sort of give the extremes in some sense, you know.
But I think I think you need, the minimum you need is a sentence that indicates there's a wide range of models, where you perhaps mention the examples at the extreme ends, where you treat the whole population as one group, to the other end where you actually try and model individuals. And then, rather, I think as long as the model makes, you know, a sentence that just says that, there's a huge range of models, from ones which treat the whole population as one lump to ones which try and treat people individually with their geographic location, their many details about their connections. And then what we need is to find 2 or 3 good references that will direct the reader, if they are interested, to preferably a number of, you know, at least 2 different views on how you look at this range of models. So it just needs good referencing, I think, because I like the idea that the whole introduction is just, you know, a couple of pages and not more than that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, this conversation really highlights that we have expertise to tangle this, maybe untangle these differences. Maybe we should write a little bit, actually, you know, making this clear that there is, as you said, Dennis, but then what is in between? Maybe a couple of sentences to untangle what is in between in the extreme situations. Maybe think about it.
I think one could probably give a good selection of maybe half a dozen models with, you know, in each case a reference to a paper of the kind of just to give an example of the range of different models that are considered. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
The other thing I was going to talk of something completely different. I was going to say, great, we have now an introduction. We have the outline of some what looked like very good challenge sections. Are we going to? We should, as we develop these things further, we should keep in mind, do we need to have a concluding discussion at the end after all the challenges that maybe bring some, you know, will there be things we want to bring together at after we've written out the challenges? So maybe at the moment one should just it could be we don't need to do that, but maybe people who are writing individual challenge sections should bear that in mind.
Well,
If there are things that cut across the challenges, it may be best to write the challenges as though they're separate individual things, but you may still actually be thinking, there's something I want to say that connects challenges 3, 4, and 5. And I can't say it in any one of those because that will just make the argument more confusing, but you might want to say at the end in a discussion.
I think that's right, but I think we can't think very much about that until we see a bit more what's going into the
exactly. I don't. We certainly shouldn't start trying to write such a thing. But I'm saying we should, as we go along writing, we should try and keep each challenge as clearly focused on its particular topic as it can be. But think as we go along. If that constrains us from digressing into interesting points, we should save up these interesting digressions and look for somewhere to put them at the end.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we'll also possibly there want to make some sort of cross references to the other chapters.
Absolutely.
Papers.
I hope that if we can develop this challenges table for the methodology papers, that that will help to do that.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so from the point of view of this introduction, I will maybe try to change this last part a little bit, the model classification, the techniques according to what we have said, and then send it out to you so you can have a further thoughts about it.
Yeah, that's great. I think it looks really good though. I like the quotes as well.
So what do we do for next week? What's the plan? Fill up this table, you said, Glenn, and then maybe do you want? I mean, maybe we combine the two and the introduction and this. So sounds like we're gonna have 3 parts of the paper: introduction, the main part with the challenges and the discussion. And then do we sort of start writing, thinking about it, or is it just worth to kind of go over together the introduction and these components and fill up the table and for next week and then after that allocate kind of writing tasks?
I think we're nearly at the stage where we could decide whether the challenge sections, the way Glenn has set them out, should be, they do work well as individual challenges. It's possible following this discussion that you might want to either rearrange material between them. I mean, I think, Glenn, can we ask you as editor to think about this?
Yeah.
Think about, have you got? I mean, you've got 5. Is it so? Will it work best with the 5 as we have them, or would you rather subdivide 1 or 2 of them, or make some other changes like that? If we could come to at least the provisional fixed position on that, then we can have people volunteering in 1s and 2s to actually try and write a complete draft of
I think
some of them may be readier for that than others. But I think if anyone feels, perhaps could we give Glenn I don't know, can you do this in the next day or 2, Glenn? I don't want to mess up your weekend.
To do what? Sorry.
Just to have a little pause for reflection and see whether you would like to change the structure of what you've written, or whether you would like to leave it as the present 5 challenges, and let us know.
Yeah.
I got the impression from what Glenn said to start with that he had sort of almost done that by deciding not to add extra. Last week we were talking about 2 or 3 extra challenges, and I wonder if the onus isn't perhaps a little bit more on the rest of us, because we've only just seen this in the last few hours, to all read it through and think carefully and feed back to Glenn any comments about. I mean, we've had a bit of a discussion today, But
yeah, I think I definitely welcome that because, yeah, as you say, you've literally seen it this morning. So,
and
so
also,
there might be a few comments on specific points that people want to make when they read it through properly.
And also, I think for people to say which of these they would like to be involved in helping to write.
Yeah.
Have we got the whole group? Have we got some people missing today? I can't quite think.
Probably have some people missing.
And there's a few.
But yes, but people who are often here. I mean, we've obviously got, I think, most people.
Let's see, there's a Ben missing. We always have two Bens, right?
So have we got Ben Ashby missing today?
Yes, for instance, and then.
Because I think when I was doing an email to the group last week sometime, I think I counted up there were about sort of 14 people and we haven't got 14 here. So there might be one or two, but Phil is here, yeah.
If you so I just wanted to
is missing. Yes, we have some missing people that we have contacted before. Right now I was looking at Glenn's mailing list. Frank Kelly. There are some people missing.
So these are all people who've popped up in these discussions on the odd occasion, but might be pressed into service.
When we're just a little bit more settled in our stride, maybe that we were thinking when we've got the sort of overall coordination a little bit further down the line, we could circulate to a rather wider list, information on where the whole Challenges project has got to, and that would, I think, should include an invitation to get involved. So that might, or we might even go and headhunt someone. If we look at one of these areas and say, well, actually, this is important, I can see it's important, but I'm not sure I'm the person to write it. You may think, but X is the person to write this, and let's headhunt X and ask them if they would help with challenge 3. So I think we need to crack on. We shouldn't just wait for that, but equally, at some point, we should advertise that we are. We should consider those options.
So one person I was meant to check is, and there was an email I CC'd you, I think Dennis and Valerie, that Mark Chaplin, I invited him to be within host. So sounded like he's too busy. And he suggested to other people. So Nicola Bellomo, I know from when I was doing my PhD, and he is at Turin University or Polytechnic, I don't remember. And so if you think we need a within host modeling expert, we can ask him. The other person that offered to help is Catriona Shia. She was on, was it the estimation? Dennis, you were there.
Yeah.
And she wants to be involved. So I suggested she has an issue with Dropbox. She can't access stuff at the moment, and so maybe once we have a better draft, then we can share it with her and ask if there are specific things that she could do as well.
Yeah, I think that would be good because she's already involved in the program, or has been a bit. So that would fit well, I think, if she's got a little bit of time to contribute.
Yeah, so she was very interested, and then send me another email saying I really would like to be involved if there is something I can do. So
that sounds good. That sounds very good.
Okay. Yeah, she might be really good for this fifth section.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the within host. We've had, who did we have who gave a talk quite a while ago on within host stuff? Somebody, I'm sure there was somebody as well as Mark. I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. Anyway.
But we should have somebody, at least one person of.
Well, I think we should if we're going to say anything about it, unless any of you feel much better equipped than I do to that area.
The only thing I have done is long time ago for cancer within host modeling, but you know, that's quite a long time ago.
Did Mark say yes or just didn't respond, or?
He said that he's very busy. If there is, I mean, he didn't say no as such. He said if there is a specific point that I mean, maybe the way to approach it is to just ask him to write a paragraph, and whenever he has time on a specific point, and
Yeah.
I mean, we could ask him that and say that's it.
Or we could draft something and get him to sort of rewrite it when he realizes how terrible a job I've done on it.
Yes. Do you know him, Glenn?
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
So I know him well as well. So between the two of us, we could potentially twist his hand.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he's pretty amenable normally.
He's very nice. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so is that a plan? I just realised the time I need to go, but
I think the plan is that we all do a bit of homework on what you and Jampi and Peter are about to send round in their case, and have sent in yours.
Yeah.
Get back any comments to you, so that we have a sort of definitive set of challenges.
Yeah, great.
And think as Dennis said earlier about the general issues of, you know, are there any more gaps, and think a bit about, are there particular people that would be good to get involved for some of these sections, so that by next week we're really in a position to start sort of firming up how to move forward on beginning to write things. Does that
sounds good to me?
Yeah, to me.
Yep, sounds good.
okay? So we've all got our homework for the weekend.
But I mean, this paper, from all the conversation I've been part of, this is the one that has moved fastest, I feel. I don't know if.
Yep, I agree.
And so I'm very happy about that.
Good. Okay, well, I think we better stop. So I think, if you can stop recording now, please.